welcome to the Media Roundtable Super Bowl edition. If you've been keeping up with us, we've spent the last few years talking to leading voices in podcasts about what they create, why they create it, and the impact they want to have on the world. This is a true roundtable format, and like we said in the name, this is our Super Bowl edition. So it's going to be focused on the Super Bowl ads, any themes that arose, who chose clarity over entertainment or vice versa, and which brands showed up sonically and how they did. Today, I'm your host, Stew Redwine, VP of Creative Services at Oxford Road. Today, I'm joined by Kristen Duenas, Associate Media Director at Oxford Road.
Hey, everyone.
And Neal Lucey, EVP Strategy and Product at Oxford Road.
Great to be here.
Always good to have you. And the one and only Jennifer Laine, Head of Marketing and Special Projects at Oxford Road.
Hi.
Hi. Alyssa Meyers, journalist at Morning Brew's Marketing Brew.
Happy to be back.
Oh, happy to have you back. All right, Alyssa, Kristen, Neal, and Jennifer, welcome to the Media Roundtable Super Bowl edition. Okay, according to Forbes, I was looking at this before the episode. They predicted there'd be about 60 commercials. By my count, is 58 spots with 50 celebrities. We looked at that year over year. It's actually less celebrities in the spots than last year. 40 minutes of ad time, and you're reaching over 100 million people. It's a huge stage. It's a Super Bowl. There are the people that bet on the outcome of the game. There's people that even bet on how the ads are going to play out. And we're here to talk about why would somebody advertise in the Super Bowl in the first place, some recent research about the audience from Alyssa. So thank you, Alyssa. Always awesome having you on. The themes of the ad this year, who showed up sonically in a notable way. And finally, we're going to end with a small fraction of advertisers that integrated their Super Bowl campaign into our favorite channel, which is podcast. So we're going to be in for an episode that I hope is as engaging as that game last night. I mean, that was a game. That is the reason to watch sports.
This is completely unrelated to our episode, but has anyone ever seen a player not score a touchdown when they have the opportunity? Has that ever happened in the Super Bowl, to actively choose not to score?
I don't know if it's happened in the Super Bowl. It's definitely happened in other games.
Yeah. Clearly it was very strategic and it worked out for them, but when he did that, I was so shocked.
Yeah, you just don't want to leave the other team any opportunity to come back. So it is a tactic that's been used before. Maybe not in the Super Bowl.
So first things first, our first question was immediate reactions to the game and the ads. It sounds like, Jennifer, your immediate reaction is who doesn't score a touchdown when they could score a touchdown. But what about the ads? What was your immediate reaction to the ads? Winners, losers, that kind of thing.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I have an unconventional winner. So I'll start with the losers, and I broke my losers into two categories. The first is a loser because it felt like a rerun, but not done as well. So the Uber One ad with Diddy felt like a lesser version of the Drake T-Mobile ad from 2017, where Drake is performing its song that was super hot at the time, but then T-Mobile wanted to buy it for the commercial for the Super Bowl, and they implement all these terms and services into the lyrics in a hilarious way. And it felt like what Uber One did with Diddy, like, though that last song was really catchy, it was just a rerun of a better version from 6 years ago.
Okay.
And then go ahead.
No, I'm with you. I'm affirming you. I'm affirming your opinions. Carry on.
My other loser was actually a missed opportunity. So Airbnb has this incredible ad right now that has it has pictures flashing, and in the back you hear a phone ringing. And the first time I saw it, I actually thought my phone was ringing until I realized that the audio was syncing with the photos, whether there was a photo on screen or the screen was black. And then at the end, it shows a bunch of photos and a bunch of videos, and you see that the phone call has gone straight to voicemail. So you're like, oh, obviously, because they're on vacation and they're having a great time. And it appeals to, like, it runs for families and friends and single girls and guys on a guys trip. Like it spans a lot of audiences. And then that wasn't on the Super Bowl. The ad they chose to run for the Super Bowl was the Yellow Submarine ad, which is like fine. But I felt like it was way too long and the photos were repetitive and it was super niche. And in the beginning, I thought it was just like a kid had a yellow submarine as like a tree house, but then apparently it was a family vacation. So that to me, I thought like, here you produce this insanely clever commercial that's like really catchy and gets your attention and appeals to a wide audience, but then you run a different commercial that felt flat and like you were just trying to be like overly emotional. It didn't work for me.
Let me ask you this: how were you watching the game? Were you streaming by any chance, or were you watching the national feed?
I way too much information. So my cable stopped working. So we actually had to use our Spectrum app on our TV. So I don't know if I was watching it like normal cable or streaming cable.
Yeah, I don't know what inventory you got because I don't think that the Airbnb Yellow Submarine was in the national broadcast.
Oh, yeah, weird.
Some of the digital commercials will be different than a run on broadcast television. So
which is just so interesting because, like, Jennifer, your perception was that was a Super Bowl ad. And I was talking to somebody this morning who, and I know we've got ties to this and might touch on this again later, saw a Ring video doorbell ad. Did you see the Ring video doorbell Super Bowl ad? And it's no. And I mean, I was watching every break, putting everything in a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Funny. Yeah. And I was watching it live. I guess I just must have been watching a streaming version.
So who are your winners?
Okay, my winners. So this is where it gets unconventional. I have an honorable mention, which is like not very appropriate and a bit risky, but I thought the Ram premature electrification ad was just like absolutely hysterical. They replicated it all the way through. The questions were questions that you would ask for sort of a medical symptom, and the answers were so on par. Like, and it felt elevated enough as to where if kids were watching, they wouldn't really get it, but I thought it was hilarious. And I was watching with my in-laws, and that it went just far enough up to the line where it's so funny and appropriate, but like it didn't make me feel uncomfortable with my in-laws who are pretty buttoned up. So I thought that was a real winner because that's a hard line to balance. But then I thought the real winner was Rihanna, because she had a makeup plug during her dance to promote her makeup label, Fenty, and she had to pay $0 and had the most impressions by far. So she, to me, won.
Right on. A great call out with that. What, Kristen, how about you?
Okay, so winners. Let's start with winners because I like winners, right? We all like winners.
Yes.
Winners for me, honestly, M&M's. I know people might disagree with this, but there's a reason for it. It wasn't that it was a great ad overall. Maya Rudolph was hilarious. But the whole time you're watching that ad, you're going, what is happening? What is happening? And then at the end, it's the clams, Maya Rudolph's candy coated clam bites. Does this sound great? And collectively, everybody said no. And then she immediately responds to, you were supposed to say yes. So they drove the audience to do this thing. They anticipated what the audience was going to do. And it was very appropriate response to that in the actual commercial. And I thought it was just very, very well done. So kudos to M&M's for making the audience react in the way that they wanted them to, right?
Yeah.
Not bad for a brand campaign. Animal Control to me was another good one. A Joel McHale, new show coming out. I thought that it was appropriately hilarious and is going to make people want to watch the show. And naturally, I'm watching this with a group of people and kind of gauging everybody's reactions through all of this. And so those ones were kind of like the winners to me, where people were reacting in the way that the ad teams and the creative teams had anticipated. So I thought that was wonderful.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point with the entertainment properties. That's one that, like we did all the grading. We've done the grading, the real-time grading, you and I. And entertainment properties, like they have those performance elements in them. Like I noticed, for instance, The Masked Singer was this Wednesday on Fox. There's such a clear action that can be taken when it comes to a television show or a movie in this huge venue. Hey guys, hey 100 million people, here's exactly where I need you to be and exactly what I would need you to do. So I think you calling out one of those as a winner is a great call. But what about the losers?
Oh,
what about those losers?
So losers, we've got Michelob Ultra.
Really?
I didn't care for it. I wanted to be inspired so badly by one of our 50 celebrities, Serena Williams, delivering this speech in a locker room, and I wanted to be inspired and I wasn't, and I couldn't figure out why I was even being why they were trying to inspire me. And then it was a beer ad, and I'm going, it just left me. I'm
going to ruin your experience of that Michelob Ultra ad of Serena Williams in a locker room, because that was for Remy Martin.
Oh, I'm sorry, Remy Martin. I messed up.
Well, but hang on. Did you have the negative association?
But she was in a Michelob Ultra ad too.
Well, I also just
so there's a lesson to be learned here.
Is get it right. Talk about right. She was in 2 ads. Right. So she was also in the Michelob Ultra ad, which had Alex Morgan. It was an okay concept, honestly. I thought it was a questionable delivery. So there was 2. Remy Martin disliked, Michelob Ultra disliked. It was the alcohol ads of Super Bowl were just a little bit lackluster, I think.
Ooh, for the booze commercials for you.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Does anybody under the age of 45 get the Caddyshack references throughout the Michelob Ultra ads?
Oh, I'll speak for the Gen Zers. I was going to say that was one of the winners. I am 25 and I am a big fan of Caddyshack.
So the Caddyshack one was clever. I'll give them that one. Another one that I just didn't care for, Pepsi. I think they could have done better. Pringles, it had potential to be funny. It really did. But I think it overall fell a little bit flat. So those were
okay. Well, so Alyssa, so Caddyshack worked for you. What else? Your winners and losers. What about you for the big game?
Yeah, I'm actually, Kristen, I have the exact opposite opinion. I was going to say that a few of the beer brands just really did it for me. I think that, I don't know, I just was thinking, they know how to do it. Classic. I did like that one with, Brian Cox and Serena Williams and Alex Morgan, all the celebrities. I just thought it was funny. Like, I'm kind of a sucker for that because I liked the Caddyshack joke. So I, thought it was funny. I also thought the Bud Light ad with Miles Teller and his wife and their dog, I thought that was kind of cute. Almost a little risky. Like, I am just a big fan of his, I guess. And I knew that was really his wife and their dog. And it was kind of lighthearted. Like it just worked for me personally because I knew that and I'm a fan. So maybe it was a little lackluster. That's like kind of a personal take. And then I think the other one too was the Molson Coors one. I think they did like Miller, Coors, and then Blue Moon at the end. A little controversial, but again, just personally, like I like the Blue Moon brand. And for people who are watching the ads from an ad industry POV, it almost felt a little bit inside baseball. Like if you were wondering which beer brand they were going to promote, they kind of played off of that. It just stuck out to me. I kind of remembered it. I agreed with Jennifer too about Rihanna. Like I was thinking when she pulled out the Fenty Beauty, I was like, this is why that woman is a billionaire. Like so smart. Losers, I will try to be democratic about this. I was very much looking forward to Gronk's field goal kick for FanDuel. I just can't believe he missed it. Like apparently he was training for months. How are you going to do that? I was let down by Gronk.
Yeah, that was, and my experience of that one was it didn't feel live. So like the T-Mobile spot with Bradley Cooper had this UGC feel with his mom, which is like, oh, it made it feel even more intimate. And that one was prepared way in advance. The Gronk one, it was like they were filming it on Alexas or like really fancy film cameras. And it felt canned, the Kick of Destiny spot to me. So, it takes all kinds. I'll go quick. Pepsi Zero and Workday were losers in my book because they both use this same technique where they go, I'm an actor. They are setting up for an entire spot with Pepsi. I'm an actor. All these things aren't true, but I make you think they are. And then they end with, this tastes good. Or am I acting? To me, it's like a little truth in every kid. Like, well, I guess it could taste really bad. Like back in the back of the brain, potentially. Workday, kind of same thing. Hey, finance people. Hey, HR people. You aren't rock stars. And we just want to reinforce that to you, that you are not actually rock stars. But I did like Ozzy Osbourne's I've done my share of bad things. I've done your share of bad things. And he's saying that to 100 million people, which I think I could probably accept that might be the case. Winners, perennial winners. This is what's amazing. They continue to use the same techniques. They score high in our messaging methodology with his Audiolytics, which is a performance-based methodology, Google Pixel, and WeatherTech. To me, it felt like both of those did something similar to the Chiefs in the game where there was like 2 touchdowns where the Chiefs like basically walked into the end zone. There's nobody there, nobody else in that area. And he just walks like, they throw the ball on it, but it's like, oh, I'm just going to come in here. No defense. I feel like both Google Pixel and WeatherTech in different ways walked into a space from a messaging standpoint that nobody else was even touching, and they continue to do it year over year. So that's my point of view.
Maybe this is because I was watching the streaming. I don't remember seeing either of those commercials.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You may not have.
Yeah.
I think
so
normally they require the brands that are advertising on broadcast to also be in the streaming, but I think there's a little bit of wiggle room where sometimes they'll let the brands opt out. So that's sometimes where you have that difference.
I was different, and I didn't just completely miss your 2 favorite commercials. One thing though, when the Grunk came on, I thought, like, wouldn't it be brilliant if somebody threw in a Hail Mary at the last minute and recruited Tom Brady to like make fun of himself in a Super Bowl ad for like going back and forth and back and forth. And I kept waiting for that till the very end, and obviously no one did it.
So, Neal, what about you? Winners and losers from the big game, and why? And then why don't you just take us right into the next point, which is why would these people even advertise in the Super Bowl in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. So first loser, and we've heard it already, is Pepsi Zero. Second loser, we've heard it already. Slightly different take on it is the FanDuel Gronk kick. It was live, but it went by so fast. Like I didn't quite get it. And it looked like it was good. I thought he made the field goal, and a lot of other people did too. So there's like, it happened so fast. It was like, did he make it? Did he not make it? Oh, he didn't make it. Oh, I thought that went in. The GM EVs. I watched the game with my wife. When you have to convince your wife the ad wasn't for Netflix, then maybe something had gone amiss with your messaging. And then I disagree, I think, a little bit with you on Bradley Cooper and his mom. I felt like it seemed like they really had no choice to do it that way because they just couldn't get the dialogue down. So it just was like a blooper ad that they ran. And then winners for me, Duncan. Love the, Ben Affleck. He's from Boston, so kind of totally in keeping with that brand. J-Lo totally dressed to the nines as she's going through the drive-through, so like makes sense for kind of who she is as a person. Popcorners with the Breaking Bad references. I really like the T-Mobile Zach Braff and John Travolta ad. They just really seemed like they got along and kind of clicked well. So it's sort of one win for T-Mobile, one loss. And then I disagree with you on Workday. I love the spot. I love how it really played off of the overused rock star in business term. And, to me, that resonates with their audience and resonates kind of from that cultural perspective of like overusing these terms and like, let's get beyond that.
You're a rock star, Neal.
All right.
So why do people, why would anybody spend the $7 million It goes by so fast. Neal, what do you have to say about that?
Oh, it's just such a huge cultural moment. Hundreds of millions of people viewing the game. I think if you're an iconic brand, if you're Bud Light, and, I read this years ago from Kantar, if you're a big brand, iconic brand, you have to spend big to stay big. So there is that element to it. And then it's also a really big opportunity for up and coming brands to grab attention. We didn't see that as much in the Super Bowl. Most of the brands that were in the Super Bowl, I think, were brands that we know already. There's a few kind of outliers to that. The other thing that kind of is interesting is, with the Super Bowl, there are pitfalls. If your advertising is bad, you can kind of, be mocked and, kind of get some pushback from that. Some of the messaging doesn't always age well. I think we learned that last year with all the cryptocurrency ads and FTX. And probably what we remember mostly from last year was maybe Larry David was right about FTX and that this cryptocurrency thing really isn't going to be a big thing. So, I think that there's good things and bad things about being in the Super Bowl. But overall, I think, it's mostly worthwhile to advertise there. And I think if you're a marketer, I just read this from Kantar, they see brands that have meaningful lifts in ad awareness. They see brands that have meaningful lifts in word of mouth. But more importantly, and this is a couple of years back, they did a study after the 2021 Super Bowl where they found that brands that advertised in the Super Bowl returned $4.60 for every dollar that they spent. So if I could spend $7 million and get $28 million back in business, I'll take that.
I have a quick question for you, Neal. I know historically you've mentioned that you were at a pretty significant brand as it was deep in its growth stages. And there was a point where every year you guys considered the Super Bowl. And in the end, you said no every year, but you referenced that there was a point where it actually would have done well. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that, as you're in your brand journey, a lot of brands start off as performance. They get to this point where, performance, they need to reach a broader audience to continue to grow. So that's important. And I think around 50% awareness is a point where enough, you're known by enough people, and that's kind of on an aided awareness basis. So unaided would be much lower than that you're known by enough where going into the Super Bowl is going to just take you to the next level in your awareness and probably put you 1 or 2 years ahead of where you would be otherwise without advertising in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and like you were saying, when you're big, you got to spin big. Something that stuck out to me was, Disney, Amazon, and Google, monsters when you think of their capitalization compared to many of the other brands in the game. And they're doing 90-second spots, and I think in general they're doing 90-second spots well. But then you do see a newcomer, and we'll get to this later, Temu. They're now the number one app in the Apple App Store. But they took the approach of breaking their ad up. I guess I would ask you, going deep on a 90 or a 60 or doing multiple 30s. What do you think of those different strategies, Neal?
I think it's up to the advertiser. I think that from a storytelling perspective, and you have that captive audience where a lot of people would tune out maybe after 15 seconds, a 60 or 90, probably works better in the Super Bowl because you really have that, attention that's been captured. Running multiple 30s or 15s, maybe not so much, just because people are paying attention to the advertising more so than they would be otherwise. So that one impression you're making, you've got them if you do it well within, be it a 30-second or a 60 or a 90 ad.
All right, so tell me if you've ever heard of any of these companies. Indeed, Shopify, NetSuite, Headspace, Quip, Theragun, Postmates. I'm not only the host of the Media Roundtable, but also CEO of a company called Oxford Road, and we are the world's leading independently owned and operated audio ad agency. And what that means is that we help great companies, many that you have probably heard of on some of the other podcasts that you listen to. We help them test and scale campaigns in audio channels, with podcast being one of those leading channels. Some of the work that we do includes media planning and buying, as well as analytics, attribution, and insights. And we also have a very special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. We have our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. If you're looking to be involved in audio and you want a partner that can help work with you to make sure that you achieve unprecedented ROI and massive scale, you should get in touch with us at Oxford Road. And by the way, the only reason that we're able to do the work of the Media Roundtable is because we have a great team at Oxford Road that supports us and makes it possible. So, what we're doing is not just a podcast, but we're really trying to help brands live out their values and balance that with their business objectives, which is an increasingly hard thing to do in this world of misinformation and malice that's infecting so much of our media. But at Oxford Road, we don't want to just broker this stuff. We want to impact the industry for good. We want to raise the bar on what gets created. And Oxford Road is helping make that possible through the Media Roundtable. So if you're somebody that's interested in working with an ad agency or a partner on this type of work for your advertising campaigns, go to oxfordroad.com. It's easy to spell. And get in touch with us, or at least just sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer. That's oxfordroad.com.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great, observation on that and we can bring preset thoughts about, well, this is what this is what they're thinking, what the audience might be thinking. But Alyssa joining us here actually went out and asked people, who would have thought that's a great idea, about Super Bowl advertisements. And why don't you share with us some of what you've seen about people looking forward to the ads? Do they want to see previews of the ads? What did you discover?
Yeah, so worked with Harris Poll this year to, ask the general public those questions. And it's a survey that Harris Poll has run in years prior. Interesting breakdown when you ask about the ads, the game, the halftime show. Perhaps unsurprisingly, people are excited for the game. It's the Super Bowl. It's a football game. So 82% of our respondents said they were at least somewhat looking forward to the game. But the share who said they were looking forward to the halftime show, 71%. The share who said they were looking forward to ads is higher than that at 76%. So the game is the number one thing. But I thought it was really fascinating that more people said they were at least somewhat excited to watch the ads than they were the actual performance, the halftime show. I feel like Rihanna is tough competition for watching ads, and it might be an answer to, what you were talking about earlier, Neal, which is why would a brand spend $7 million on this? It's rare that you have people walking back to the TV as opposed to away from it when you're talking about the ads. So yeah, there is excitement. People want to see them. I experience it when I'm watching, we've got, sometimes people are talking more during the game than they are during the ads.
Yes.
Yeah. There's this trend too of a lot of companies will release their spots or a version of it, a preview before the game, which is fascinating because in the survey that I did with Harris Poll, it seems like people aren't actually that into that idea. It's an interesting thing with timing. I think it was 73% of people we asked said that advertisers shouldn't release their spots in advance. So that would be an interesting thing to talk to marketers about. Call to action. If you want to explain to me why you're doing that as a brand, I'd be interested to hear it. If you want to hype up the spot or something. But if you're asking for the opinion of the general public, I think that people want to be surprised when they sit down to watch the show.
Yeah, I had a buddy of mine who's a commercial director talk about how there's always the show in front of the camera and the show behind the camera. And I think in advertising, it's the same. There's the general public, and then there's us, the makers. And the 250,000 or so people that are in advertising, maybe we're the ones that are really excited about the previews. Maybe, the actual audience for that there isn't a performance reason to do that. It's just almost a vanity play. It's part of showing that you're clever or something like that. I mean, what do you think of that, Alyssa?
Yeah, I wonder why they do it too. I wonder if part of it is a PR push. Like, that's just my question as a journalist is, releasing it ahead of time. Are you trying to get media coverage? Is that like a metric, a KPI that you're looking at? I'm curious how different brands actually measure the performance of these ads. You would think it would be very like serious, numbers heavy, cut and dry. Like, you're spending this much money, we need to hit these stats. And from what I've heard, I'm not sure. I think that brands are just like, obviously we're going to do this, need to be in the Super Bowl. And I wonder like how many hard numbers they're looking at to track return on ad spend or something like that.
Yeah, I read that the ancillary media value that brands get dwarfs what they're spending in the Super Bowl. So just all the PR coverage. Now, whether it's like at the level of you're getting your message across that you saw in the Super Bowl or not, that's kind of a factor that comes into play where that, the hype around it, the previews, watching the commercials on YouTube, that ancillary value can actually dwarf what you're spending on the spot.
I think who did it well was Avocados from Mexico, because they had a kind of trailer that they pre-released ahead of the actual spot, which was also still pre-released. But if you ignore that fact, then they treated it kind of like the movie studios treat a movie, where you release a trailer to get people pumped up and kind of like engaged before the actual ad drops. And so I think if brands did something similar, right, because you're shooting it all at the same time and you have a trailer leading up to the actual full-length ad, just to kind of create that chatter and drive that engagement before everything goes out, I think that would be the more reasonable play to go and not just have the full ad out there. But that being said, you have to consider the amount of people who are watching the Super Bowl just for the ads. There's people who actually play squares, like the squares game, for commercials and trying to figure out, okay, well, we know that these ads are running, so obviously we need to know in advance who's going to be spending $7 million a spot. And then they look at the time on when they think it's going to drop. And so they're playing squares the same way the football fanatics are, but for the ads. There's people who are very enthusiastic about the ads. And so they might be more amped up by those pre-releases than anybody else.
Maybe we need to work that into next year. We should do that. I know we do the squares for like the game, but we need to do the squares for the ads as well.
Stu, if you run it, I will play, but I'm
exactly. Are you suggesting that? That's something you can do. Yes. And speaking of KPIs, Ad Age had a whole article out about the He Gets Us campaign. So the article, how the Jesus Super Bowl commercials were received. And one of the notable tweets was from RGA, because we were talking about KPIs. This is RGA's tweet. Extremely curious to know what the KPIs are for the Jesus ad. And there's a few along those same themes of like, how are they measuring success when it comes to this thing? But I thought, they were well done. It reminded me of When God Made a Farmer. There's been some other campaigns, even that Airbnb one you're mentioning, Jennifer, that they didn't put in the big game, but similar, where it's like, yeah, save me the moving pictures, just do stills. Like, I'm good. Like, I've seen Marvel movies. If you're going to move something, you better move it at that level. If it's not going to move, just show me a picture. I'm good. And this guy's tweet was, the in-house marketing team for a political action committee for Jesus made a better ad than most of the big brands this year. And I don't think he was far off. It felt like in general, kind of an average year as far as the ads went. Some themes that I picked out for me were happened to be alliterative. So booze, betting, Breaking Bad, Believers, and Shop Like a Billionaire. So they're pretty self-evident there. Booze, we saw those ads for the first time. Betting, there was a lot of that, calling people to action. Strong position, because it's something you can get them to do right away. Breaking Bad with the popcorners, I just think it was one of those tie-ins with an entertainment property that was smart, that really like everything clicked, which was so cool. The Believers, like I said, with the, there's been a lot of reactions to the He Gets Us campaign. And then the one that I really pick out the most is Shop Like a Billionaire with Temu. It's the number 2 app right now in the App Store, at least right before this show. The Fox Bet Super 6, which was also advertised as number 3. But Temu, I could remember today Shop Like a Billionaire. And I'm like, I don't even know what this thing is, but it's like, man, it got its hooks inside of me. So what about you guys? What are some themes that you picked up from the ads this year? Neal.
Stu, you missed the punchline. Sorry, you missed the punchline on the joke about KPIs on the Jesus ad. I feel like I saw several people tweet, what's the KPI? Conversions.
Oh, nice.
Had to get that in.
Yes, well Alyssa.
Done.
Not
Thank
my
you.
joke. That was on Twitter.
I did. Oh, man. I did.
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, a lot of celebrities. I'm surprised actually that it's fewer celebrities than last year because I felt like so many of the commercials had celebrities. A fair amount of nostalgia, I thought, with references to, obviously Caddyshack, Grease, even Safety Dance, which had its heyday in 1982 or something like that. Wow. So there's that for me. The other thought I had was it felt like there are brands or categories that were notably absent, and maybe that's the climate that we're in currently, and the people being fiscally responsible, but not much in the tech category. So like no Salesforces of the world or Microsoft, no insurance. Last year, I think State Farm had a big commercial with Drake in it. I think that was in the Super Bowl. So that was another big category that was absent. Even though Pepsi Zero was in the Super Bowl, like it seemed like less than what they would normally do. Obviously, Pepsi used to have the halftime show, but kind of like that Pepsi Coke kind of dynamic of being in the Super Bowl wasn't there as well. So I thought that was interesting. And then I thought that, from the brands, maybe it really works for brands if you're alcohol, CPG, if you're promoting a movie or entertainment or a streaming service for that matter, that it really works for those brands. So you really have to be a mass brand to make it work. But that's just how I felt kind of coming away from the game.
Also, I thought, I'm sure this has happened before, but it felt like a choose which brand you want to have, where you're going to give your alliance. And I think it was mostly because there were so many alcohol brands and you're seeing them all back to back to back. And then it's just like, well, who's going to get my attention? Or like the Uber one versus DoorDash. And it's like, well, actually they did a better commercial. So I would go with DoorDash. Or there were just a few like head-to-head categories that I thought, and especially with cars, like you kind of, this Super Bowl to me forced the audience to choose an alliance based on commercials and whether or not they'll actually follow through with those actions. But to me, that came across more in this one than it has in years past.
I wonder about the longevity on that, Jennifer. Like if you had to choose an alliance, you're talking about all the beer brands back to back. Maybe today I'm saying, oh, I liked X beer brand Super Bowl commercial the best. I feel like I'm going to run into the problem that I think brands run into every year, which is in a week, in a month, in a year, I'm not going to remember the brand. I'm going to remember, oh, it was a beer brand or it was a chip brand or the actor outshined it. Like I feel like years from now, I'm going to say, oh, the Will Ferrell Super Bowl commercial and not Netflix GM.
Yeah. And I guess like at the end of the day, the commercial doesn't change the product. And though I loved the Bud Light commercial and I want to give them my business, I would likely not bring Bud Light to a party because it feels really discount and I should bring like Fort Point Brewing Company or something that feels more on brand for me.
Well, I thought about, first, like Bud Light had category exclusivity, right? And so they paid tons of money beyond what they would pay for the spot to have that. And the reality is consumers have repertoire brands. So you're buying multiple alcohol brands, and maybe it's just a recognition that category exclusivity, is it really worth it when they're going to buy Miller Lite sometimes anyway, or they're going to, buy Crown Royal for other occasions, and maybe a recognition that, brands are not that exclusive to consumers.
It's a great point. I mean, that's all of Byron Sharp's work, is kind of points at that very thing, that people aren't as loyal as we may think. The kind of classic Harley Davidson, the majority of Harley Davidson owners are a dentist or a lawyer that rides it once, if that, and it's sitting in their garage, not necessarily somebody with all the Harley gear and, you know, going out to the diner every weekend and, hey man, let's go for a ride. Great points, everybody. It's amazing what an arena the Super Bowl is for advertising. It's, you know, something that we look at as performance language, obviously, and we've got our methodology here at Oxford Road, Audiolytics, which is a 71-point scale of whether these 71 different aspects of a message are present or not present. Over the years, we've graded all the Super Bowl ads in years past, 2018 and 2019, most notably for Business Insider. And so using those two data points, the average scores in those years was 54% in 2018, 56% in 2019. And the score actually dropped down to 47% here in 2023, which tells me that there wasn't as much of an emphasis, even as in years past, on what we would call clear value statements, or let's say features and benefits, some of your classic performance language, calls to action with discounts, as there have been in years past, that people were indexing more on the side of feel-good abstractions. One way to think about this or talk about this was, were we seeing more brand advertising or were we seeing more performance advertising? What was your guys' experience of that?
I think for me, it was definitely more brand advertising with a few notable exceptions, right? You've got the Temu Shop Like a Billionaire. You've got Limit Break, which I still have no idea what that's for, but the QR code definitely drove people to try and figure out what that was. So there was definitely a couple that had a clear call to action, clear performance metrics. And then, but most of it really was largely brand, which is, I think, standard for the Super Bowl. If you're going to spend that kind of money, you're not looking for performance.
Did the Temu ad mess with any of you guys with the controller? Did anybody think something was going on with the show? Definitely did with us. Who's doing that? Because we watched it with my extended family. So it's, who's doing that? What's going on? Like, that was the two.
Actually, you know what? Now that you say that, it definitely happened to us where somebody, as we were streaming and using an app on my phone, I actually thought that somebody had grabbed my phone and was doing something on it. It caught me totally off guard.
Yeah, it was, you know, so that was kind of interesting. They interrupted there, you know, how powerful is that? Who knows? But now let's pivot this thing into podcasting, which what I see, I mean, headline is wide open space. Of all the advertisers in the Super Bowl, you know, approximately 15% of those, 15 to 20, let's say, are active in podcast. And only about 7% of them actually had Super Bowl messaging in their recent podcast ads. So these are the most recent podcast ads leading up to the game. Very small number of the advertisers that are in the Super Bowl that were also advertising in podcasts had any kind of tie-in across those different channels, or across, I'm going to be in the largest stage, and here's what I'm saying on podcasts. Notably, Bud Light, DraftKings, FanDuel, Miller Lite, and Coors Light. So our betting and booze pals were leveraging podcasts leading up into the Super Bowl. So when I look at that, I see, man, there seems like there's a ton of opportunity to be talking Super Bowl in podcasts, which is such a conversational channel anyway.
I find it interesting that you mention like Bud Light and the alcohol brands advertising in podcasts, because I think podcasts historically have been seen as performance, right? DTC. And one of the fastest growing categories of spend in podcasts at the moment is CPG. So it's not just for performance advertisers, brand advertisers that are taking advantage of podcasts more and more because of the audience, and the audience kind of accepting and being really receptive to advertising there.
So to break those acronyms down, you're saying podcast has been good for direct to consumer, somebody shipping razors or food to me direct to my door. But now you're seeing one of the fastest growing areas is consumer packaged goods, stuff I'm actually buying at a store, right?
Exactly.
I guess, Neal, putting you on the spot, and you don't have to answer this, but if you were giving a branded advice, say one of the Oxford Road clients was going to do a Super Bowl commercial, they knew they'd given us several months notice, what would be the top headline on how to dish it out in the lead up, and then what that tail looks like and how you use the channel afterwards to sort of give this ad and this money as much distance as possible?
I don't really have a great answer to that. What I would say is if you're planning to run an ad in the Super Bowl, that you have to spend as much time or more time thinking about what you're going to do around that ad that's running in the Super Bowl. So how are you going to leverage that asset in social media, through owned media, through other advertising venues? I mean, it's kind of often thought that, like for sports sponsorships, for instance, you buy the sports sponsorship, but you almost have to pay double or spend double or triple that investment to really make it work. So I think it's just thinking about, it's not just the spot, it's everything around the spot and planning that way.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think across the board, even audio is growing, right? It's what we're in all the time. There's a lot of opportunity in the Super Bowl in that regard. There was a couple that tied into existing mental availability. What I mean by that is tying into songs we already know. Tell me more, tell me more. T-Mobile, Uber One saves me more. Whatever. It was great. Then also the musicals. We've seen musicals in years past. We had T-Mobile. We had Booking.com. I feel like there was another musical one with John Cena. Which one was that with the purple cow? Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, apparently it didn't land. And distinct sonic assets. This is where Avocados from Mexico, they've got their, avocados from Mexico. They've intentionally designed that. Bush, which is interesting. The spot that aired in the Super Bowl, the Bush was longer than in the pre-release. So I'm like, I wonder what that is. I think sometimes they change movies, before they're released or whatever. And maybe that was just my experience of it, but it sure felt longer in the Super Bowl spot. And then Disney with When You Wish Upon a Star, 100 years of that sound. They don't leave it on the table. They definitely leverage that. All that to say, I think, man, we see very little connecting to podcast and truly very little connected to audio. So there just seems like a tremendous opportunity for people to do more in the big game and all the media surrounding the big game from an audio standpoint. I mean, what do you guys think of that?
There was somehow more connected to audio than I anticipated, actually. It was something that I was thinking about. I have tried in years past to kind of do a sonic strategy story tied to the Super Bowl. So I definitely had an ear out. And maybe the most surprising thing was the Uber One ad. I was like, oh, this whole ad is about a jingle, which is pretty funny. And then I think Temu had basically rolled out. It sounded like a jingle, very song. There were some brands that had subtle sonic logos. I'm not sure if I want to call it that, but Amazon plays a little tune when they show the smile at the end of their ads. So maybe it was just because I was really listening for those subtle ones.
Well, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. People are going into it, and I think there's more. All right, so we've talked about a lot. We'll definitely be doing this again, and I'm sure we're going to see people continue to tie in audio and do more in the space when it comes to Super Bowl. And of course, we would love to be a part of that. But I want to end with one question for each of you. Just like this game was won with a field goal, which of these ads was a game-winning field goal for you personally? And quick surprise question, we didn't have this before. Did any of these ads inspire you to actually take action and transact with an advertiser? Neal, let's start with you.
T-Mobile, tell me more. Probably the last impression wins for me. It was one of the last spots I saw. and happened to be a T-Mobile customer, so maybe reinforced my decision.
Kept you from switching. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Neal. Jennifer, how about you? Which one was a field goal for you in your heart, and which one did any of them make you take any action?
Oh, okay. So kind of, yes, actually. But in a way that likely won't help in a meaningful way. My favorite feel good was Bud Light Hold. I feel like everybody tries so hard to be authentic, and they actually just captured a real moment of how life is lived. And the dance moves, it's just like everybody's had that scenario in their life, and they look at it fondly and they remember it fondly. And like, it doesn't happen every time you're on hold. Obviously, sometimes you're on hold, you're like yelling at your phone, but I loved that. It felt very genuine, and it felt like they were trying to relate to their customer in a meaningful way. And I would buy Bud Light, actually. To my point earlier, I probably wouldn't bring it to a party necessarily, but you know what? Who knows? Maybe I would. I haven't had Bud Light in years. Maybe it's really good. Again, I don't remember college.
It'll make you feel young again.
It did, but it also didn't, because it felt like a very adult moment. And it's like the small things that happen at home when you're with a friend or with a partner that nobody really sees, that really mean a lot. And that, to me, was what Bud Light was able to capture. And I think that's really hard to do.
Yeah, that everybody knows that they tied into that hold music that we all know and love. What about you, Kristen? What's the field goal, and who did you transact with because of a Super Bowl ad?
So this is going to be a weird one. The Batman commercial. In the war of DC versus Marvel, I have chosen sides, and I am clearly Marvel. I will watch DC movies. They consistently disappoint me for a multitude of reasons that we don't have time to get into. But Michael Keaton coming back as Batman, I will go see that movie. You have gotten me to the theaters. Congratulations, you did your job. I will go watch this movie, and I hope it does for me what the first Wonder Woman did for me, and doesn't disappoint. So Michael Keaton, Batman, winner.
So you'll go see the movie. So that's the same one.
Yeah. I'll go.
I think just like, look, the Disney one got me. I love Disney. Touched me. You reminded me. And like when he came out and that like they worked in the song from Batman, I think I'm voting with Team Kristen. Like, that was amazing. It took me right back. Like, I remember watching that. I'm gonna go see that movie, no question. And I probably would not see a Flash movie.
No.
Like, that's where like I tolerate DC.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back in. I'm gonna give him another shot. I'll do what I can, but it is hard to fall in love, and that like made the connection. So I'm with you. My vote's Batman. We should go see Batman together.
I will fly back to LA to go see Batman with you.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll close it out with our special guest, Alyssa Meyers. Which ad was a touchdown in your heart, and which company would you transact with?
I said it already. I'm Team Jennifer on this one. I agree that the Bud Light ad did it really well, and partially because it was almost subtly relevant. Like the fact that they cast Miles Teller doing that little dance, like he had a viral moment on TikTok last year with a scene of him dancing in Top Gun Maverick. Like I think you could see why they did what they did and cast who they cast, and it really just was feel good. So I'll agree with Jennifer, and to have an original thought. I think two brands that won for me just in terms of like buzz and conversation, it's Farmer's Dog and Temu, just because those are brands that like usually I feel like I am not hearing about ever. And then last night and today, those were, brand names on my lips and I'm seeing on social. And so I think they deserve some shout outs for that.
And that's kind of like like Neal was saying earlier, that's what we're talking about, is it's everything around it, the conversation around it. And that's what you're seeing. Yeah, the power of the dogs was strong last night.
So many dogs. Amazon did it too, I think. Yeah. You pull out the heartstrings. You can't lose with a dog ad, I think.
Doesn't seem like it. Sure doesn't seem like it. That's one that comes around and it keeps winning. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining the Media Roundtable Super Bowl edition. The Media Roundtable is dedicated to our mission of mobilizing marketers to advance truth and civility in journalism. We want you not just to know the news, but use it for good. If you're a marketer looking to balance business objectives with your brand values, reach out to our agency, Oxford Road, by visiting oxfordroad.com and subscribing to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. Thank you to our super guests and to Bianca, Kyle, Haley, and the team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly.